Today we are here with Cody Carter. Welcome. Cody is a personal trainer. He's a fitness manager. He's an online coach. He's a former college basketball player. And today we're going to just have an amazing conversation. Today we're going to go ahead and talk about a little bit about fitness, what the difference between fitness and training for health is really like, and some of the experience that he's gone through in the past few years, transitioning from being a collegiate athlete to now being a fitness manager and a personal trainer who helps other people change their lives. Welcome.
Excited to be here.
Let's do it. So, Cody, so you are 26 years old, and from what I know, you came from Idaho.
Correct.
Right? And you were a basketball player, and you played multiple sports growing up. So tell me a little bit more about what that was like. Did you grow up playing, was basketball your main sport, or did you actually start with a different sport?
Grew up in a ski town, Sun Valley, Idaho. I think I was skiing before I could walk, which was pretty normal there. It was just kind of what you did when you have that quality of mountain there. Skiing, soccer was actually one of my first sports, and baseball. Those were kind of like my playing t-ball. That was my dad's sport. Got into soccer. I don't think I picked up basketball right away. I think my mom actually made me go to a basketball camp one winter because she was like, "You're not just gonna sit around and play video games all winter." And that's where I met my best friend, who I've known since third grade. I'm gonna be the best man in his wedding. Still talk to him to this day, and found the sport that I went and played college and helped give me my education. So
did you, when did you decide that you were going to start playing basketball and that was going to be your main sport? Did you have this amazing growth spurt? Because how tall are you?
6'4".
You're pretty tall.
As soon as I got into basketball, like elementary school was definitely like the sport I enjoyed the most, and then like got into middle school, sports get a bit more intense, started playing football, didn't really like football. Baseball kind of fell off, soccer kind of fell off, and basketball was just the one that I ended up spending a lot of my time doing. And then as I got towards high school, I had this mentor. His name's Carson Sofro. He ran a basketball camp that would come to where I grew up every single year. And he kind of was like, "Hey, like you have some potential here. If this is something you want." And he had gone and played college. He had gone and played pro overseas. And he kind of runs this basketball camp where he helps get some of these people who are maybe less seen, and help them get some college exposure. Still does it today. And he was kind of really the first person who told me that was a possibility, and then helped give me a little roadmap on, hey, these are the things you need to do. Like, then once we got into like my sophomore and junior year, he helped me with, hey, let's, get a highlight video going. Let's get on one of these recruiting websites. Let's start talking to college. Let's work on these parts of our game. We're not just playing basketball anymore. Now we're kind of training to go play at that next level. And I think about my sophomore year of high school is when that change really shifted, and I was like, okay, we're doing this for a purpose rather than just playing a sport because we like it.
Right on. And so then if your sophomore year was the time that you really started focusing, prior to that, what would you consider your level of consistency with sports? What type of child were you? Were you the type that, still played video games, or were you the type that was always focused on a different type of sport? What was it like?
A little bit of both. I mean, growing up, it was like a lot of, we'd be outside playing basketball in the driveway until it got dark and we couldn't see, and then we'd come inside and play video games until 4 a.m. And then we'd wake up, and then the next day it's like, cool, let's go to the park, let's go ride our bikes around, let's go do something active. And then come back inside, and then, cool, play video games till 4 a.m. So that was kind of my childhood and what my friends did. A lot of activity level. Got involved in CrossFit early in high school, which was pretty cool. Then kind of found that fitness community, enjoyed working out. Was a bit different than like the typical, like, there was the football team. The football team at my school was very just like, they liked their thing, and they lifted weights. But being a basketball player, it was not quite the training that I wanted to do.
Right.
And so found a lot more enjoyment in that CrossFit community of, basketball is a cardio sport. So we're doing things that transfers a bit more to the training. And then getting good at CrossFit just helped me on the court. I was even more in shape and more successful there.
Right on. That's really cool. Yeah, for me, it was a little bit different when it comes to my childhood growing up. Like, I didn't have video games. I never really got, well, one, we couldn't afford them. So, in a family of 6 with a very minimal income, we didn't get to have the privilege to have video games. But I'm curious if you had this dream to become any professional athlete when you were younger, because when I grew up, I knew from like the moment I started playing, and I don't know if it's in all sports, but I know in the soccer community it's big. Usually when you start playing soccer, like you already know at like age 6 to 8 that you want to be a professional athlete. And for me, that was a big goal. So I from an early stage, I went immediately into like, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. Did you have those type of thoughts, or?
Absolutely. Was definitely like, oh, I want to be a professional athlete. Didn't really understand what that meant, but if you asked me like, hey, what's your dream job? It'd be, I'll be a professional basketball player. And then growing up, playing more sports, getting exposed, and like kind of realizing, oh, that's maybe not the most realistic option, but then finding out that's like, hey, there's still a way that I can take this sport a bit farther than just high school, which is not a thing a lot of people get to do. A lot of people, their sports stop at high school, and then from then it's like maybe they pick up a men's league as they're older, but getting that 4 more years was a really, I don't know, it's not an experience a lot of people get to get.
Right. Did you find yourself having an advantage among other kids when you were playing at an early stage, or did that happen later when you started growing? When did you start realizing you had an advantage over others?
I was always fairly athletic. I was taller. I didn't really grow until after my freshman year. My freshman year, I think I was like 5'10", 5'11" maybe, and then 5'10", and then my sophomore year I was like 6'2", 6'3". So that was the big growth spurt. It was funny. There's my freshman year, I still had really big feet. So I was like 5'10", size 13 shoes.
Oh, wow.
And there was a time I was sitting at the free throw line in a game, and my teammates and my coach, and he will always remember this. He like looks over at me and he's like making some sort of gesture. I'm like, what are you doing? And I guess I had tripped or something, and so they're all making fun of like my clown feet because I got these big old shoes on as a 5'10" freshman. I was like, guys, I'm shooting free throws right now. Like, why are we heckling me? You're my own teammates. We had a good laugh about that.
Did you end up making it?
Yeah, I made the free throws.
Good. That's funny. So you grew a lot in just a year. I've been experiencing that with the kids that I've been coaching in the last year, because I picked them up when they were 8th graders. Most of them were 8th graders. Some were 7th. Now some of them are going into sophomore and freshman years. So most of the team now is transitioning into high school kids. And I was just telling you this before, right? They had this big growth spurt. So I have a picture of them starting in May of last year. And then we have obviously their body scans of how much they weighed. And some of them have gone from like 100 pounds to 130 pounds, like 120 pounds to 150, right? Anywhere from like 15 to 30 pounds in a year, right? And what I'm seeing now, like this team used to be a smaller team amongst all their other competitors, and I just went and watched them play the other day. And it's so cool to see them, how built they are, right? Because they got this big growth spurt. They put on all this weight, but they look so much better on the field. And it's just really cool to see how if you put training at the right time, the big advantages that it has. And it sounds like for you as well, right? You got into CrossFit at an early stage, and obviously that helped propel you forward. Did you find that a lot of the other kids around your age, were they training at all, or did you start seeing the difference from the ones that did and didn't?
There was, you had the people who played sports year round, that played a fall sport, played winter sport, played a spring sport, and then did some sort of travel thing in the summer, right? Those were your athletes. Those were your top tier athletes. They had their sports that they liked the most, but they're pretty much any sport that they did because they just trained so much through practice, that kind of training. They were good at things. And then basically the less sports people did, usually the less athletic, the less physical they were because they only trained some of the year. Where I grew up, the football team lifted and did that kind of stuff. And then outside of that, like no one else really did. Like I said, I got lucky enough to get involved in CrossFit, and there were days where it was supposed to be this like class that our high school went to. There were days where it was literally just me, and like it was just me and these CrossFit coaches, and kind of got to benefit from that. And then I got some one-on-one training where we got to do some more basketball specific kind of stuff. But there wasn't a whole lot of people who went and worked out. It was, you did your sport and you went home. There wasn't this big workout culture. And I think, as you can see, that it was, I mean, I still remember in middle school being told that you can't lift until you're high school because it'll stunt your growth and all this other stuff, and things that we know now aren't true, and that if at the right time we can get these kids to lift, it actually can help them learn how to use their bodies at a young age. I remember last spring, I worked with a softball team, a Santa Cruz softball team.
Yeah.
Freshman age girls, same thing. You know, some of these girls came in and like barely knew how to squat. Like we're like, hey, let's do an air squat. Their knees are wobbling all over. By the end of this, some of these girls were doing like 60-pound kettlebell or goblet squats.
Mm-hmm.
You know, doing RDLs with 2 40-pound dumbbells in each hand, and like with good form and to the point where like they were strengthening, not just like. And it's crazy what their bodies are capable of doing and adapting to at that early age.
Yeah, 100%. You know, now that we're bringing in even younger kids. So same thing happened to me in that scenario where the older kids, right? There was obviously some that had really good mobility, but then there was also some, and now we're finding it more on the younger kids. We just had a bunch of 8 to 12-year-olds that really poor mobility, which is really interesting. And it shows the different types of lifestyles now that kids are starting to have, right? But with the older kids, right, I think they still some of them are in a good place where they've improved so much. Their deadlifts have improved, right? And we do a lot of trap bars. I love doing trap bars with them. But with the younger kids, it's so interesting. And we just ran into this recently where some of them are just really hunched. Some of them they don't know how to run. And it's actually a little frightening because we had this whole plan of like how we're going to progress these kids, right? Assuming that these kids could move. And obviously when you think of an 8-year-old kid, you think, okay, an 8-year-old kid should be able to squat no problem, right? Like they should be able to move, they should be able to run, they should be able to turn, change directions, no problem. We're just going to go ahead and help them and teach them, hey, this is how you turn, right? This is how you turn more efficiently by turning your feet before you hit the line and dropping your body. That's how you're going to be able to accelerate out of the turn. But what we're finding is that majority of these kids don't have coordination. They're lacking the ability to run, right? They can't jump. And so we had to kind of throw all that plan away. And then we're like, okay, we're starting from scratch, right?
Square one.
And it's very interesting because it makes me think like, how involved are the parents becoming, right? And as coaches, like, what are we doing to help these kids become more athletic versus just going out and saying like, here's the ball, let's go play? Because from what I see now, I think a lot of the coaching that's what ends up happening, right? There's a lot of volunteer coaches, and a lot of them don't really know what they're doing. They want to contribute, they want to help, but what's happening is kids are coming home, they're playing video games, right? So they're rounded the entire time. They're sitting on the couch. Food is horrible. Yep. And now, you know, they're going out and playing sports, but their mind is somewhere else.
Yeah.
They can't wait to go home and play video games and watch TikTok and do all these other activities. When you were growing up, obviously you're a little younger than me. I know it didn't exist when I was growing up, so the sports was still big. Being out in the parks was still big. But were your parents involved as well in everything that you did? Were your parents very active with you?
I mean, my parents have never gone to the gym. They're not
Yeah.
those kind of parents. But they were active. My dad would go play noon basketball on Fridays every single week. He'd go out in the driveway with me and we'd play basketball and do that kind of stuff. He was my coach up until, probably middle school-ish time in a lot of different sports. Active guy, played golf a lot, would ski, that kind of thing. My mom the same way. She was a gymnast, so like she coached my sister in gymnastics, so she kind of stayed active through that. And they would always tell us to like go outside, do stuff, go on walks. And so they weren't necessarily like big gym or like sport people, but they did promote that, like, let's get outside, let's go play, let's do that kind of thing. And I think you just see less of that, right? Like as kids, we would just go outside and play. Like we had phones, but I didn't get an iPhone until I was like, I don't know, freshman, sophomore in high school. And you just had a little slider phone and didn't really do much. You're not scrolling through TikTok on your little flip phone. So yeah, we'd come in and like once the sun goes down, we'd get on video games and do that. But that play, I think, is just gone, right? Lots of kids, you see kids, they're on iPads, they're watching the TV, and it's a bit easier for them to keep their attention that way versus going out into the world and playing and doing that kind of stuff. It's funny you say that you're seeing that so early because we see that with adults, right? We see like adults from our generation, you play sports, you play a lot as a kid, and then you go sit at a desk job for a couple of years, and then you come back as a 32-year-old and you're like, hey, my shoulders are hunched, my body hurts, I need a personal trainer, right? The fact that we're seeing that in kids at an early age when that's the age they're supposed to be playing and doing all this stuff and moving and using their body is just frightening to hear.
Yeah, it was really scary, man. Coming home the other day, because we just launched it this week, and coming home the other day, I was like, holy shit, like, we have a problem. We have a big problem, right? If kids at 8 years old, they're already obese, like, what is that going to look like in 10 years, right? What's their future going to look like? And so, a big thing that we talk about, and I've been talking with my coaches, is we need to make exercise fun, right? Because let's forget about trying to make them athletes right now, right? We need to get these kids to enjoy and learn how to be outside more and learn how to play. They need to learn how to crawl. They need to learn how to climb, right? I guarantee you most kids don't know how to climb a tree. I guarantee you most kids can't jump a fence. Right? So we need to start creating these type of obstacles so that we can mimic a lot of the behaviors that later in life we're going to go ahead and try to apply, right? Which a squat, a hinge, a pull, a push, right? A climb, a throw. Most of these kids don't have that, and those are just natural skills that you can develop by playing.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was very frightening to see. And it's a big issue, and I think for parents, we need to, I think, do a better job of taking our kids outdoors. And we live in a very interesting time right now where, obviously in California in particular, it's extremely expensive, right? And so you're finding that parents are working more, multiple jobs, right? Like I got to experience that. And now even like programs are becoming expensive as well, so that kids can, go and do other stuff. Daycare is expensive. Everything's becoming so expensive that it's so much easier to just keep your kid at home, give them a phone, fill the pantry with some food, and they're good, right? But as parents, like I feel like we need to start looking at what's happening and identifying that we have an actual problem and that we need to get ourselves out of this, right? Because it all has to start with the parents. Like we have to make a better plan to say, hey, you know what? I am working a lot, but on the weekends, we're going to do our best to go out. And, because I think now that the parents are struggling are struggling as well, right? Most after the pandemic, I think most people learn to be indoors, and they learn to have all these apps that tend to do everything for you, right? We have an app that shops for us. We have an app that, like, we can get everything instantly, and we've become so accustomed to that lifestyle. And you're probably finding this out, right? As in personal training and working with adults, right? That you get the typical client that says, "Hey, I move a lot." And I'm like, "Well, what are your steps?" And they're like, 4,000. And I'm like, "Okay, so that's a lot to you."
We have a long way to go.
We have a long way to go, but it's crazy that I always think about. It's like, okay, so if this is doing a lot for you, then what was it before? Right?
Yeah, 4,000 is a lot. Where were we when I wasn't moving a lot? Yeah, that's frightening to think about.
Right. And so, as scary as that seems, like, obviously we need more people like you that have experienced a different type of lifestyle. And I love the fact that you come from sports, because, I always talk about, and actually I think I wrote it down. I wanted to hear your point of view of what the difference is from and you've probably experienced all these different types of people, and you can probably identify who is who by just the way they act and the way they carry themselves, from a person who never played sports, right? Never done any physical activity, to a kid who dabbled in sports but never really took it serious, to a person who actually followed through with sports and got all the way to to become a college athlete. Like, what are those differences that you see now as adults? What are the major differences that you see?
So if someone was an athlete of any kind, they probably have a pretty good ability to, like, push themselves. And they also understand how to take coaching and usually give feedback back, right? And I think that's a big part, is, like, understanding how to be coachable. You'll get some people who you can just tell them, hey, like, move your elbow up or move your knee out or drop your hips. And they don't really know what they're doing, but they're able to just take information and hear it and then try. And then you get these people who've never really been coached, and you're like, hey, I want you to move your arm in. And then they look at you like you just spoke Swahili to them, because they don't understand what, like, they understand what you said, but they don't know how to, like, take that and then just try something, even if they don't exactly know what to do. So there's that ability to just try to do whatever the coach is telling them. Do you see in people who've done athletics versus people who haven't? Also, you get people who have played, if they played athletics, especially if they've been very successful, they're often extremely hard and extremely critical on themselves, a lot more than the non-athletic people, right? They get a win and they're really hyped about it, which can be good. They can kind of overemphasize a small win, but sometimes you get these people who were athletes and you're like, hey, you just, you accomplished a goal, and they're like, okay, well, cool, now that's not good enough.
What's next?
And we kind of glorify that mindset in athletics as, like, what's next, but it can become detrimental, because sometimes these people never really give themselves credit and thus lose motivation to continue making progress, because they don't actually celebrate their wins enough to, like, feel good. They're hypercritical. They're negative about themselves. It's always, what can I do more? All right, I squatted 100 pounds. Well, why can't I squat 115 pounds? And then they get that. They're like, why can't I squat 130 pounds? And that can be a negative in some cases. So it's interesting to see. Like I said, there's not always just like, oh, being an athlete has its pros. Sometimes there's some pros and cons to each kind of upbringing.
Right. Where do you think you find yourself in that spectrum?
I have a very hard time just doing a thing. Like, it's always, I need to get better at it, which, again, can be productive, but then there's also times where it's like some things can just be done. Like, I can just go to the basketball court and play, or, like, get on my ukulele and just play. Like, I don't need to be, like, improving. And I have to kind of mark or audit myself on that, because there's times where it's like, hey, let's just enjoy this activity for the sake of enjoying an activity. I don't need to sit here and, like, beat myself up because I'm not getting better than I was last week at it. It's just a hobby. It's not that serious.
Right.
But there's also aspects where that allows me to continue to make sure that I'm doing my best effort. I'm putting my best effort forward. I'm not being complacent in it, whether it's my programming or my education around fitness or how I approach my clients. Or, there's been times where I'm sitting there programming and I think of a new way to like lay out my program. And now 2 hours later, I haven't done any programming, but I've completely changed how my programming looks to make it look a little bit easier to read. Is that a positive? Is that a negative? Was it a good use of time? Right. Was it a not good use of time? Hard to say.
Right. So what you're saying is you've been a little bit more selective with where you apply that versus, do you feel that, especially obviously, like I've experienced this myself where I went from athletics and we speak about the all in mentality. And I came out to the real world where, we like to, back in athletics, we call it general pop, where people are not so serious about certain things. And did you find yourself struggling in that environment? Did you find yourself where people were like, what's wrong with you? Right? Because I found myself in scenarios where I've gone back into sports and, there are people that are just playing for fun. And for me, playing team sports was never for fun. It was always to a win. And, I still believe that. I still believe that team sports should always be to win. And I think that at a younger age specifically, one thing that I completely disagree now is the participation trophies. I don't think that you should get a trophy for participating. Like, no, you need to learn how to win, because later in life, like it shows, right? If you give out too many participation trophies, then we get this entitled human being that grows up and it was like, hey, I showed up to work, I need a raise now, right? And we see that a lot. Hey, I showed up to work, I have no skills, but I want to make $100,000, right? Or hey, you're treating me indifferently because I made a mistake and now you called me out on it. Right. And so I do think that team sports teach very specific lessons, and I don't really think that we should modify them. I think we should let them be. I think what we can work on is the way we address the behavior and maybe spend more time teaching valuable lessons outside of what is right and what is wrong outside of the field. But I think sports should always be to play to win, right? Otherwise, why do we keep score?
Absolutely.
Right. And for me, it was very difficult now as an adult going back into the rec leagues and co-ed leagues. And people were like, bro, you're just way too intense.
Like, I'm a very competitive person. And I've had to kind of adjust some of that because, coming from, playing sports at a high level, playing at that collegiate level, and then coming to like going to an open gym or a men's league. Yeah, some of those people are just there to like have a good time. And it would be very frustrating. There was a period of time where I didn't go and play basketball with other people because I was just like, their lack of competition, their lack of like, enthusiasm towards winning. They're just out there for like themselves. And that really like bugged me. I had to like figure out how to like be in that environment. Gotten better at that. I really enjoyed competition. And so I think like, oddly enough, finding situations where I lose in, I'm a bit more drawn to, because now I can kind of use that urge of like, hey, if I go up against someone who beats me, whether it's at basketball, like someone's better than me, or we're playing a board game and someone beats me at a board game, cool. Now I can kind of lean into that desire to get good at something, and now I have something to improve at, right? Versus going, and if I just go to an open gym and it's easy and we win, that's not really fun. It's really more the competitiveness that drives me. And so seeking out those opportunities where I can lose, and now, cool, I have something to get better at. And that's kind of how I've augmented that competitiveness and that need to win and keep score, is trying to find people who are better than me at things. Because it's not really fun when you just go and play a game against someone who doesn't. I have one of my best friends. She's never played a sport ever. Love her to death, but she's just not a competitive person, right? We're playing Clue, and she's just like, there's a strategy. We're trying to win. And that's just the difference between someone who grew up an athlete and someone who didn't grow up an athlete, right? She's just there to have fun and hang out and engage versus, trying to win the game. But I think those are important lessons, that having I think it helps create that drive, that ambition to like want something and be like, oh yeah, I'm bad. I didn't succeed. I didn't do that. There's a lot of like coddling that happens when you give people participation trophies. I'm like, oh no, you did fine. You did fine. And it's okay to tell, kids and people, no, you didn't do good. It's not a reflection on your character. You're not a bad person because you didn't do good. This is just an opportunity for you to improve. And if we don't highlight that, if someone does a bad job, whether it's at work or they lose a game or things like that, and we just give them that participation trophy, then they think that effort's okay. And then they're, oh, I don't need to improve. I got rewarded for this, right?
Yeah, that's huge. That's a good one right there. Yeah, I think, most people, it's really hard to take criticism. And if you don't get taught at a young age to be criticized and to be pointed out of like, hey, this is a flaw, we need to fix it, right? It really shows up later in life. And we're seeing a lot of that right now, right? And obviously, because you work with people very closely and you get to listen to a lot of stories, right? You can probably also tell, like, once again, who's played sports, who hasn't, who played for fun, who played for competition, right? And it's really cool how now at an older age, you get to see that in people. The moment they fall off the diet, or the moment they make a justification for the reason why they couldn't eat their meal. And then you try to correct the behavior, or you try to get them to understand, and they take it personal. They get upset, not realizing that I physically gave you money for you to tell me what to do. And so I've found myself in that scenario many times. And, at first for me, it was very difficult because, once again, coming from a college place where we're just told how it is, like, it's either you do it or you get out type of place. But I think now, as I've been in coaching for so long, now I try to have empathy for people and try to understand and be like, okay, how else can we tackle this? Instead of calling them out, okay, what do I have in my toolkit and from the experiences that I have that I can go ahead and change this and kind of show them the way instead. Because it takes time. It's not a switch that we can just turn on.
No, and it's, especially as a coach, there's definitely been clients where I've, gotten, they fall off their diet or they don't do this, and you're like, hey, what the heck, right? And like they have that initial kind of withdrawal response where they do take it personally. I think as a coach, something important is I've thinking back on the coaches that I've enjoyed the most and not enjoyed the most in my athletic career, right? That support, right, is like, if I felt like by not doing the thing I disappointed my coach, then I reacted differently to the whatever it was, right? And so I think, with my clients, I try to like show them, like be there, support them. It's like, hey, if you didn't get this thing that we tried, yeah, I'm frustrated because it's the third week in a row that I'm trying to get you to eat breakfast because you got to get more protein because you want to get more muscles and be stronger, and you're eating 1.5 meals a day. And I'm like, all right, did we eat breakfast this morning? You're like, no. I'm like, all right, well, let's try again for tomorrow. And that support. And then if they feel like they're disappointing me, enough times they'll kind of like do it for that reason. Like they don't want to see me disappointed. And then eventually they start doing it for themselves because like something has to kind of kickstart that habit, right? Whatever the reason it is they're doing, at least they're doing it now. It's like, oh, I do it because I don't want to tell my coach that I didn't do it. Great. And that they do that for a week, and then it's 2 weeks, and then it's like, hey, you eat breakfast? Like, oh, I feel better. It's like, oh, you're feeling better. Cool. So I think being that, it's hard as a coach because you're trying to tell people what to do, and people don't like listen very well, and they don't really get told things very well. I think they kind of just have to like, you have to kind of lead them there and kind of like corral them and like get them to do the thing and then feel it for themselves. I remember one time I had this client who she's trying to lose weight, and we were working on her snacking. So I was like, cool, this week for your snacks, like let's eat fruit instead of chips. Right? Just make a simple change. She finally did it. She did it for like 2 weeks. It's like, cool. And every single time she'd come in, it's like, I ate my banana today. She'd give me some sass about it. And then one week I was like, all right, today I want you to go eat your chips. Right? Snack on whatever you want. She was like, sick. Cool. Went and snacked on whatever she wanted. Came back the next day and I was like, what's up? How's the snacking? And she's like, I don't feel good. I'm like, why? It's like, well, I snacked on chips all day. Now I don't really feel good. It's like, I don't think I want to do this anymore. Boom. And then she was done. And so sometimes you just got to kind of like lead the horse to water, get them close, right? And if that's in being disappointed in they don't want to say a bad thing to you as a coach, whatever works to get them to change that behavior.
Yeah, that's a very cool method to use, right? Because you get to show them the other side, and then you take them back to where they started, and then they realize, like, you know what? Now that I've seen the other side, I think this side is going to be better. And we see that a lot in our community, particularly. It might be yours as well. I think drinking is just big all around. But it's waking up every weekend hungover, and they've been in that environment for so long that they don't even know what feeling good on Sunday means. They don't know what Sunday not being hungover means. And when you get people to do it, and I think this is why challenges can be very beneficial to a certain extent. I don't think they're always the best, but I do think that it allows you to, for at least for a moment, to realize what the potential can be, right? And it shows you a different viewpoint. I know we just started one. We just started a 60-day one, and it was just to help us kind of realign ourselves again. For me, specifically, I don't diet anymore. I don't follow any strict diet. I eat very well, but one thing that does happen though over time is when we get into flexible dieting or intuitive eating, you start allowing a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and then all of a sudden it starts getting a little too out of hand. And in particular for me, it doesn't really affect me much. And I always talk about this, how I've been doing fitness my entire life. So for me to become obese, it's going to take quite a bit of time. I would have to really shift my eating completely, and it would probably take a few years before I'd see the effect. But I do notice that whenever I start allowing more chips into my diet, and we bring those around, all of a sudden I'm having more of that, and all of a sudden it can start getting a little out of hand. And it does affect my sleep. It affects how I start feeling. And so I've become very conscious of what's happening around me and how I start feeling. And if my sleep is starting to get interrupted, if I'm starting to develop some brain fog, if the desire for training starts to go out, then maybe something's wrong with my food. And maybe I have to and it's really hard to do it, because once you get into those high palatable foods, you start craving them, and it's so easy to go into that route. And so Dre and I just kind of went back and we're like, you know what, let's just do this for 60 days. Let's cut out alcohol. And that's one thing that I've been working on for the last 10 years of reducing. Another issue that came with college, right? and Division I sports, intense drinking. But we've also cleaned up our diet, and it also just helps me become more structured. It gives me that daily reminder of like, hey, check your schedule. You got to drink your water. You got to carry your canteen around. Basic little things that if we don't pay attention to, it could all just fall apart. And you can go from like being very disciplined to all of a sudden like not drinking water, not working out, right? And we tend to set all these excuses. Like for me, what happened over the last 4 months, I got an injury. I tore part of my labrum. Going back and playing with the kids, trying to do stuff that I was younger, trying to do a bicycle kick, and I landed on my shoulder. The next day, I couldn't even pick up my arm. And I'm like, I think I actually hurt my shoulder. Went to the doctor, got an MRI, and sure enough, tore my labrum. Damn. So I was out for training. I've been out for training for almost 4 months now. And I just started training the other day. But it's interesting how if I stop training, and then I'm like, well, I'm not training. I have an extra hour. So I'm like, all right, I can have a beer this weekend. I'm not training on Monday. And then all of a sudden I have another beer. And I'm like, all right, well, if I'm out being social and having a beer, I'm going to take some of that fried food that's there. And then all of a sudden it starts falling apart, right? And I think that's why challenges can be good to a certain extent. What's your take on it?
I have a love-hate relationship with challenges, right? Because I think some people do the challenge and think that if I just did this thing for 30 days, I'm now healthy, and then they just go back to the thing, the old behaviors. But, as you were saying that, I was thinking back to, I remember when I first joined CrossFit, and we did for the month of October, we did no refined sugar. And because Halloween's at the end of the month, we're like, all right, let's no sugar for the month, no soda, none of that. And I was like, I'm gonna do it. And I'm a very stubborn individual, and so got home, told my parents, told my friends, and everyone's like, you're not gonna do that. And so just out of pettiness, I'm like, okay, cool, I'm just gonna do it just because people don't think I can. Went the whole month without sugar. At the end of the month, Halloween, we go trick or treat, whatever. My favorite candy's Laffy Taffy. Get some Laffy Taffy on October 31st. Literally almost threw up because I hadn't had that refined sugar all month. And that's how quickly that change can happen. And ever since then, haven't really not a big soda person, not a big candy sugar person. Just kind of lost the taste for it. I prefer salty or savory. So challenges can work if you do a behavior like that. It's amazing what the body can adapt to, right? And especially you're talking about that drinking, right? Alcohol stays in the body for I think it's 5 days. That's still working itself out. So if you have a drink every single night, eventually your body's just getting used to having this toxic in you, and it's constantly trying to pump it out, and it's not breaking, so we're not processing protein well, we're not recovering well. Other functions of the body just aren't happening because we're constantly trying to get this stuff out of our body. And yeah, it's one drink, but you're just keeping this drug in you for an extended period of time. And you don't realize that how bad it's making you feel. You don't realize that it's disturbing your sleep, things like that. You're not getting to that deep sleep as often.
Right. Well, when you think about, and then now that you're on that topic of toxins staying in your system, well, then we can get into caffeine, right? So now, and this is where I always tell people, if you just start tracking, you'll find out, it's so easy to start eliminating things and removing things and seeing the difference. Because if it's one drink a day, if it's 2 cups of coffee a day, right? If it's 1 bag of chips a day, right? All that adds up. And then, like you were saying, all of a sudden your body, all it's doing is just working on trying to get rid of this. And we obviously have the type of customer that goes to the gym, super consistent, going to the gym, still can't get results though, right? And they're not willing to look at the drink. They're not willing to look at the chips. They're not willing to look at the 2 cups of coffee and no water, right? And when I start working with clients that don't want to do that, right, I start the elimination process, and I start with 1, right? So if we're doing 2 cups of coffee, let's do 1, and let's do that for a week or 2. Then all of a sudden, let's minimize the drinking. Let's, instead of 1 every day, let's have one every other day, right? And you slowly start pulling them away from that, and then all of a sudden, you start getting the weight to drop, and you're like, oh my God, I dropped half a pound. I'm like, interesting, right? But I think people need that daily accountability when you're putting them through this process, because it's so easy to just go back to it, right?
Well, and substitution's a great method there, right? Because taking something away is hard, because now we're if my morning routine is wake up and drink a coffee, or my evening routine is come home and have a beer. Well, if I take that away, now I'm still missing something, right? So if you can substitute that out with something, right? Come home, wake up in the morning, and have a tea, have a water, right? Go for a walk, right? Substitute something out. That usually helps those behaviors change a little bit quicker. Than just removing a behavior, because then now you're sitting at home and I'm like, man, I really want to drink, versus, oh, come home and I don't know, go for a walk when you get home, right? Substitute a behavior. Or come home and make dinner, right? Let's add the behavior of cooking food rather than coming home and just sitting on the couch and ordering food and having a beer. Substituting some of those behaviors helps with that behavior change.
Yeah, 100%. I think, yeah, substitution is definitely the way to go. I also think that, like, alcohol is one of those where if you feel like you need to have a drink at the end of the day, you also have to ask yourself, like, why am I feeling like this?
It's probably some
Right?
better stress management that can go on, right? And I've noticed this in my job talking to a lot of adults. A lot of adults don't have hobbies.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm like, hey, what do you like? You have your job, and you have your family. Like maybe you have kids, maybe you don't. But what do you like to do? And they're like, all right, TV. I'm like, watching TV isn't a hobby. Like that's an activity. It's not a hobby. But what do you like to do? Like, when was the last time you like did something creative, played some music, did draw, read? Like, what's a hobby you have? And I talk to a lot of people every day that they just don't. And so they come home and they eat and they sit on the couch and watch TV, and then they go to bed and they wake up and go to work the next day. And then their workload probably doesn't actually increase all that much, right? That the stress, ebbs and flows a little bit. But what happens is we don't do those things that help us unwind and de-stress in the evening, right? That get us into a parasympathetic mode, get us into a rest and digest mode, get us actually to unwind, think with other parts of our brain. And so then we're just constantly in this like fight or flight stress thinking about work. And if we spend a long time in any phase like that, like it starts to become not great. I'm sure you as an athlete, if you take like a week off and you're like, hey, I'm injured, first couple of days are great, right? Maybe you're on a vacation. And then I know for myself, after a certain point, it's like after like 4 or 5 days, I'm like, man, I just need to move my body. Like I can't just sit here because now I'm being lazy. And then I want to sleep all day. And even getting up and like going and filling up my water is just a task that's too much because I'm just in this mode of just laying on the couch and being a couch person.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you sit, you're not going to want to move. You start laying down, all of a sudden you start feeling depressed, you start feeling sad. There's all these emotions that come with it, right? And you become a couch potato, and that's where I think a lot of people find themselves. And, that's one of the things about walking. It completely changes that. The moment you get someone moving, right? And I think walking is one of the most underrated activities that there is, because back to the steps, most people don't walk, don't move, right? And if we look at, I think it's like I've calculated on my watch, it might be more or less, but for every 10 minutes of movement, it's roughly about 1,000 steps, depending on obviously how tall the person or what watch you're wearing. But I've always used that. And so if you only move if you only get 4,000 steps, then that means you only move 40 minutes out of 24 hours. Let's say you're up. Let's say you're up 16 hours. Okay. Let's be fair and let's say that everybody gets 8 hours of sleep, which
Sure.
we probably know it's more like 4 or 5, right? So let's say you're up for 16 to 20 hours and you're only moving 40 minutes. Like, just take a second and think about that, right? Like, how do you expect to want to move if 90% of the time you're sedentary?
And your body is not very smart. It is just going to get really, really good and really, really efficient at whatever you give to it, right? That's why you get people who can drink crazy amounts of alcohol, right? Because they just keep drinking, and all of a sudden they get to the point where they can drink more and more and more and more, and their body's like, cool, we've just learned how to handle this much, right? You can also get on the other end. You get people who just do tons of activity, right? There's people who can't run, and there's those people like marathon runners, like super marathon runners. They just train their body to be able to withstand this amazing amount of mileage from running. Your body is really incredible in how it can just adapt, and it will adapt at whatever you do. And if you sit a lot, your body's going to get really good at sitting, and it's going to slow everything down, and it's going to make you want to sit because that's what it thinks is going to happen. If you move, if you eat, if you use your body's going to get really good at doing that. And so it can be a pro and a con, right? If you're a sedentary person, it's going to be really hard to get active that first, couple of weeks of trying to change a habit because your body's so used to that. And the longer people spend being in these not so great behaviors, the longer it's going to take to override that, right? Cool. I'm sure you've seen this. Someone's been sedentary. They're trying to start their family, so they go sit at a desk job, and they've been doing that for the last 7 years. And then they come into the gym for like 2 months, and they're like, man, I'm not fit yet. And it's like, we have 7 years of habits to rewrite. Mm-hmm. Even if we're good for a year, a month, and we're still that little ticker on which way the habit's going to go is on an edge of like, oh, we want to go this way, but I have 7 years of habits pulling me back this way that I got to counterbalance out. Mm-hmm. And if we take a week off, where's it going to go? Is it going to go to the thing that we've been doing for a year or a couple months or a couple of weeks, or the lifestyle we've been doing for the past, extended period of time?
Right. Yeah. And like I always say, like, it's so easy to go back that way, right? Because that's what we know. That's what we've known for so many years. And I think those first couple years for people that get into the fitness space are so important. It's so important to have, one, a supporting community. I think that's huge, right? Because those are the people that are going to bring you in, right? We get some members, same thing, come in for 3 months, and then they're like, all right, they get some results, and then they leave. And then I see them like 6 months later or a year later, and I'm like, what happened? And this is probably one of the reasons why most people always put all their weight back on, right? Like, they go back to their old communities or their old ways of being, and, well, what do you think's going to happen? What do you think got you to the point where you were at? And what makes you think that if you go ahead and change those behaviors and you get this X result, but then you go back to the previous habits, like, what do you expect? Right? And I think a lot of people don't take a moment to just sit down and analyze that, because it's, when we say it out loud, it's pretty obvious, right? But I think it's that, again, that you were saying. It's that we've done something for so long that people get fooled. I'm not sure what the right word is for it, but they believe that they can start tapping into that world, and once you start doing it again, all of a sudden, here you go.
And we're highlighting a lot of people who are kind of new to the fitness, and that health world. But the same exists on the other end, right? Mm-hmm. And this is a conversation that we kind of wanted to get in, was the difference between health and fitness, right? And a lot of times people see people who are very fit and assume that they're very healthy. And sometimes those very fit people have behaviors that are also just as detrimental to them not being able to be healthy, right? You take, as an athlete, there's always, we're overtraining. You get injured and it's just right back to the training. There's no like, hey, let's for my health, right? Let's get back in and heal this. I had to get ankle surgery after my freshman year of college because I sprained my ankle 5 times in 8-9 months, right? 3 of those I was in a boot for because I just wouldn't rehab the injury, because it was just get back to play, get back to play, get back to play, right? And then all of a sudden, for my health, I had to go get surgery, and that took away from my fitness for a long period of time. So both sides of the aisle, right? The unhealthy people and the very hyper fit people do behaviors that don't allow them to make the progress they want to make, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really difficult to find that in between, right? And I know that a lot of people are always trying to find balance. And I don't know if balance actually exists. At least I stopped trying to find balance. I just adapt, and I become aware of where I'm at, and I've always find this range where I like to stay within. And there's sometimes where I kind of tend to go more this way, and then I'm like, okay, gone a little too far. Let's bring it back, right? Because I've been in the same scenario as you were saying, where injuries, and a lot of injuries. I experienced a lot of injuries in college, and we can go into, obviously, we spoke about it earlier. Outside of this, we talk about specialization. Kids going into and playing one sport only for 15 years, and then going into and trying to become a professional athlete, and then eventually their body wears out. Right. Obviously, there's a lot of factors. I think for me, there was obviously the factor of poor sleep, too much partying. That was another big factor that I think contributed. But I also do think now that we know a little bit more, and that we get to experience different kids and different types of customers, I do think that the athlete that has a more well-rounded youth and plays multiple sports has the ability to go, the further distance. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I agree. I think, and we even see that in training modalities as adults, right? Is like there's not one particular set of skills. If you do one thing, right? I in college I worked with track athletes a lot. Track athletes are phenomenal at going in a straight line, but the second you'd ask them to go side to side, they felt like they injured their hip because they've never moved this way. They've only gone in a straight line. Now, for their fitness, for their performance, that's what they need to do is just go in a straight line. But when we're talking about general health, and especially for kids, and that's the goal is health and creating healthy young humans. Yeah, we need to get them to go in as many different directions. We need to get them side to side, up, down, laterally, roll. All these different movements need to be covered, and no activity does them all, except for maybe gymnastics. Gymnastics might just be the best activity for young children to do. Still workshopping that, but like in terms of if there was just one, that's a pretty good one. But the point is, the more different things you can do, the more you're going to get exposed to the different movement patterns, different activities, throwing, running, catching, doing these things. Like just the more, the better.
Yeah, you had to be well rounded for sure. Another part that for me, I think that led to a lot of injuries is, and you were talking about continuing to push through injuries. I think also in the college world and probably in the professional world, you're basically a number, and you played Division III, right? So you were not on a sports scholarship. Is that correct? Okay. So Division I, you get to go on a sports scholarship, right? So technically you're not getting paid any money, but you are, right? Yeah. Because they're paying for your education and for you to have the ability to go to the school. So you are a number as well, right? And I remember my injuries, and it was, we got to get you on the field as quick as possible. And I remember my first year, I had a pull on my quad after doing sprints because we lost the game after a game. After a heavy week of training, and then we played a horrible game, and it's like, all right, everybody on the line. And I ended up pulling my quad. And so, I go to the training room, and obviously we have all the care that we need. And so we take care of that. 2 weeks in, everything we tested, it feels good. 2 weeks in, I'm back on the field. Feels good. 15 minutes into the game, pulls again. And it's like, all right, back to the training room. Let's get you back. 1 week, back on the field. And we did this for like 8 weeks straight for like 2 months. Once again, the season's only 3 months long, right? 3 to 4 months long. So the amount of error that there is, like you can't have an injury. One injury basically takes you out, either half the season or the entire season. And so we're pushing it, and then eventually like partially tore my quad. Done. There goes 6 months. And same thing happened the next year. Broken foot, and then it's like, let's push it, completely breaks, out. And then I had another one was my fourth year was what do you call it? I think I tore part of my lower ab. We thought it was a hernia for a long time, wasn't. And then eventually that popped up. And then my fourth year, I broke my foot again. So I had 4 season-ending injuries, and that was it. My college experience was done. I never got to play, but it was we were on a timeline, and we were just pushed and pushed and pushed. And we never really got the chance to recover or to take time off. And that's just the unfortunate part about it.
And that's fitness though, right? And again, this is the difference between health and fitness. When you're going for a goal, right? And as a soccer player, your goal, you guys have a fitness related goal, right? You are trying to achieve something, right? You're trying to accomplish something. Mm-hmm. That's what I determine as kind of fitness. It's like, what can I do? What can I make my body do? Mm-hmm. You guys are trying to win games. And so the goal is to be out there and be available, right? In lots of different areas of elite level fitness, whether it's bodybuilding, whether it's powerlifting, whether it's CrossFit, your goal is, I need to accomplish this thing, right? I'm trying to lift as much weight as possible. You know, you're a bodybuilder, you're trying to put as much mass on it and look a certain way. CrossFit's an aerobic sport where you're trying to like perform and get through this workout. And I think that there's a misunderstanding that while yes, for like Gen Pop, usually getting fitter means getting healthier, right? If I'm trying to add some muscle mass, I'm working on some of these habits that associate with that. If I'm trying to lose weight, I'm working on eating a bit more protein, working on my sleep. Those are healthy habits that help us get fitter. But there is a point where we cross that line, and now I'm pushing into the fitness and I'm getting away from these healthy habits, right? You've done a bodybuilding prep. There's a point where you're not sleeping because of the things you're putting your body through, the amount of stress you're putting your body through, right? You're not healthy at that point. You could even talk about your relationship with food and eating, right? There's a point where you, just as people who are new to health and fitness, you know, they don't have the due diligence to like put down the chips. On the other end, if you can't rationalize picking up a chip or having a beer because it's just going to send you into this world, this topsy-turvy, like, oh my God, I'm going to fall off the wagon, that's also not healthy, right? But if we have a fitness goal that requires that, that's okay. But that's not how everyone needs to live all the time. And so understanding, you know, you get these Gen Pop people who see these fitness people and think that I need to be like that. And then they try to hold themselves to that standard, whether it's I need to be in the gym every single day, or I can never, you know, I got to eat chicken and rice every single meal. I can never take a break. It's like, no, you are two different people going after two different goals. You're just trying to be healthier. This person has some weird, obscure fitness goal that they're trying to do things in lieu of their health to be better at.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's a big push right now for no pain, no gain, right? It's got to be painful. It has to be painful in order for you to reach that goal. And while, yes, there's times where you're going to have to become more strict, and I totally agree that in order to reach a specific goal, like let's say you want to lose 20 pounds, I do believe that you have to become strict during that period of time that you're trying to achieve that goal, especially if you have a deadline. Realistic deadline. I think a lot of the deadlines that people set themselves for are very unrealistic. But if you do have a deadline, let's say you had 6 months and you're trying to lose 20 pounds, you're going to have to become a little bit more, you know, you're going to have to restrict some of the foods that maybe don't benefit you as much. But you do, like you were saying, you definitely need to be careful where you absorb this information from, because a lot of the times the information that a lot of the people are absorbing from or they're consuming from is coming from people who have very intense lives. And I know that for a fact because I was one of them at a certain point when I first got into the bodybuilding world and I became a coach, right? It was like, it's this way. It's got to be this way. You got to eat chicken and rice and broccoli, and that's the only way. And I pushed that on a lot of people at the beginning, right? Yeah, did they get a lot of results? Absolutely. But did they all keep their results? Probably not. If I look back, maybe I would say a handful out of the 100 people that I helped at that time kept their results, right? And that's what really happens to a lot of people. They go to an extreme where, yes, they do lose the weight, but they get so burnt out by it that they end up going in the opposite direction and they actually gain more weight than when they originally started. Or you get an injury. And then we know that what happens with injuries. All of a sudden you start laying on the couch, you can't train. All of a sudden you start socializing a little more, you start drinking more, and then here we go back into the same.
And I think that's an important thing for coaches to realize is like a lot of us came from athletics, right? Where we can turn that switch on and get really strict. And it's almost a comfort zone for us because we've been in that strict thing before, right? We've been in this very regimented, you know, the athletic life. It's wake up, we're here, class, workout, eat, boom. Like it's just very like planned and regimented, and we just can do the same thing over and over and over. And we've gotten used to doing the same thing over and over because that's what it takes to accomplish this goal of winning the season, right? It's not just, we understand that the individual practice isn't all that much. It's, hey, showing up to practice every single day. So we can kind of toggle that switch on and just get back to that comfort. We spent a lot of time there. A lot of people can't. right? And if we try to push that on people as coaches, expect them to be there, or not realize that we can be in that environment that they necessarily can't get to, right? They're not as regimented. They can't just eat the same thing for every single meal a day. They can't, it's harder for them to do that. They don't have that experience. And so as a coach, having that understanding of like, hey, the way my brain works, the way my behaviors work are a lot different than how these general population people did. And that's why they're coming to see you, because they don't have these behaviors. They don't have that ability to just flip a switch on and be like, yeah, I got to lay off the snacking, right? I got to get back on my chicken and rice. They're coming to us for help with that because they're like, hey, I've realized I don't know how to do this behavior on my own. Yeah. And then as a coach, they're in square one, right? They're less than square one because they're not even at a neutral behavior. They have a lot of negative behaviors that we got to slowly build up and get better at to even get to the point where now we have a neutral behavior and then we can start working on a positive behavior that's not going to go back, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a huge realization as a coach. And I think that's a moment that as a coach, if you're coaching, you need to be able to take a moment and really identify who's your customer, right? Because yeah, I believe we do set unrealistic expectations for the customer and we let them know what those expectations are. And reality is that we're trying to get a customer to sprint when they're barely learning how to crawl. And that's a huge gap in between that we need to teach. And like you said, we hold something that obviously they see that they would love to have, but we have to be able to simplify it to the simplest form in a sense where they can start taking those first steps. And I think this is why a lot of coaches become frustrated in the field. I know that I found myself in certain points a bit frustrated because you just want people to change so bad. You're like, I have the solution. We have laid it out for you. But you're trying to get them to read a language that they haven't learned yet. Right? You're trying to teach them to learn Mandarin when they haven't even understand the alphabet yet. Yeah. And so I think that's something to take into consideration when you're coaching is who's my customer, and then just realize that it's going to take time. Most of the industry, and this is one thing that I've learned being in the bodybuilding world and being outside of the bodybuilding world and working with General Pop, that when you're in the bodybuilding world, I think people think that it's this huge industry and there's tons of people. But reality is that coaching, the majority of the coaching happens outside of there. Most people actually just want to learn how to have better sleeping habits. Most people just want to, learn how to eat better. Most people want to learn how to be able to socialize without feeling guilty the next day. Like, that's really what it comes down to, and teaching them the path for success that is going to take 10, 20 years. Because think about it. How long have you been doing health for?
Again, I think that depends on your definition of health.
Well,
right?
Okay, let's say
I think there's
right.
Being a human, I'm trying to be as healthy as possible, but there are definitely times in my life where I was not doing things for my health, right? When I was a college athlete, that wasn't healthy, right? Where the amount of work that we're doing, the little sleep that I'm getting just so I can stay up and watch another episode of Netflix because I need a mental unwind because I've been at class all day and I've been at practice and lifting, and then we go drink on the weekends, and none of that was healthy, right? That was like more towards, like I said, the fitness goal. Recently, been doing a lot more things for health.
But let's talk about though being like, let's just think about being active, right? Like pursuing something positive, pursuing a positive goal of health, right? Like, how long have you been doing this for? And comparing yourself to now our everyday, American, right? How long have you been doing this for? And it's probably what, 15 years, right? And we talk about this all the time. And what's your mindset on your next 40 years? Are you going to stop? Probably not, right? Your goal is to be as healthy as possible. And as you get older, you're probably becoming more healthier, and you're being more conscious of that.
And that's a good point you bring up in talking about how these things take time, right? And And a lot of people want to know how much time. And you just said it, the answer is there's no end to time. It's just how long can I do this for? It's not I need to do this for X number of months or even X number of years. It's how many consecutive years in a row, how many consecutive months in a row can I do things for my health? And that's what changes habits. That's what gets us to be healthy. Is I'm always trying to just make it. I'm trying to every single day, add another day, add another tally to that. I'm continuing to work towards my health. It's never something you stop, because if we stop, they talk about this in the bodybuilding, powerlifting world. If you're not growing, you're shrinking. Right? If we're not moving forward towards health, then we're moving back away from it. If I'm not working on my water, if I'm not working on my sleep, if I'm not working on my nutrition, if I'm not working on my mental health, right? All those little things, if I'm not taking steps, little steps daily, bigger steps weekly, bigger steps monthly in that direction, then I'm walking backwards away from health.
That's a very simple way to put it. You laid it out perfectly right there. I completely agree with that. And the frightening part for a lot of people, like I was saying, is injuries. You get injured and all of a sudden, this huge fear comes, right, of I need to keep working through my injury, and then it ends up setting them back. I've learned along the way, and I've dealt with a lot of injuries. I understand the other opposite point of view where people are like, you don't need to stop training. Over the last few years, I've taken 2 months off training, 3 months off training, up to 6 months off training. I'm talking lifting weights, right? And for that same reason that you were saying, I've experienced so many injuries that I'm at a point where if my injury takes 6 months to heal, I'm going to take that time off and I'm not going to push it, because I know I'm only 30 years old. I have 50 years to go. Exactly. Right? And so if you think about those 6 months being off, knowing that I'm trying to do exercise for the next 50 years, that's nothing.
It's an easy transaction.
You know what I mean? And I've learned now I'm a lot easier with myself in that sense of if I have an injury, I'm going to let it heal. I've gone into running. I changed the activity. I've stayed active. I've focused more on. I've had the ability to focus more on my business, right? And obviously, once again, there's no balance. Now that I focus more on my business, has it grown? Yes. But now, is it starting to become a little bit too stressful? Yes. Okay. So now I've gone way too far this way. Okay. My injury's feeling better. Now I know that exercise is a great tool that I can use to de-stress. So now I'm starting to take some hours away from work, put them back into the training aspect. And guess what? Now I just kind of moved that needle back into the middle again.
Balance is a funny thing because everyone talks about balance like it's this 50-50 thing, right? Yeah. I remember as a kid, you're trying to you get bored. Not a whole lot to do in Idaho. Mm-hmm. So you pick something up. You're let's figure out where the balance point is. Where can I hold this? And so it's balanced. Rarely is it in the middle, right? And I think balance is more this concept of how far can I go in one direction or the other without this thing tipping over, right? It's a glass of water in your hand. It's how far can I tip this thing back and forth before it spills? Because we don't want it to spill. But I need to know, how much can I lean into, training? How many times can I go? And then I get injured? Cool. That's where that point is, that I tipped over. But also, how little can I do? How easy is it to maintain where I can just do one time a week or a very minimal activity to, again, keep this activity going, keep this progress happening. When you get injured, all right, injured my shoulder. Doesn't mean I stop all activity, right? Let's do the things I can with my shoulder. I still have legs. I still have another arm. I still have lungs. I can go do a lot of other activity that doesn't involve me doing whatever hurts for my shoulder to do. Mm-hmm. So balance isn't all or nothing. It's this kind of sliding scale of, I can go a little bit more here. Well, if I'm a little bit this way, then I got to take something from something else, right? If I'm going to lean into fitness, take away from my business, right? Oh, I can't be super into my fitness right now because of an injury, or maybe work gets more stressful and I can't be in the gym as many days as I want. That's fine. That doesn't mean I don't go. Maybe I go too, right? Yeah. And I think understanding that is that it is this sliding scale. Yeah, I'm not perfect with my food, but I can do a little bit, right? Okay, I'm having less drinks. That's a positive, right? Cool. I have my chicken. I have my beer. All right, that's better than ordering pizza and having a beer, right? Find that sliding scale, find that position where we're not tipping it over, and we can kind of figure out where the ends, where the ends are. That's how we figure out balance.
Yeah, and life throws, life tends to throw these signs at you, right? Injuries, problems at home, right? And talking about that, like I just experienced one, and it's once again, it's learning to listen to those signs that life throws at you and be like, I'm tipping this glass over. Hold on. Let's reassess. Let's take a second. Let's not try to go all out and maybe I already pushed it too far. Let's take a second, reassess, and what can I do now? Because here's a sign that I need to listen to. This is not just random. This is something that is trying to get my attention, and I got to pay attention to. And I recently had one yesterday, as a matter of fact, as we talked about putting more focus into business. Like I've been for the last 4 or 5 months, I've been going all out on it, right? And we tend to throw more stuff on our plate, and we're like, oh, we can handle that. And then we don't really see the immediate effect until a few months later or a few weeks later. And so I started adding more to my plate, adding more to the plate. Yesterday I was in San Jose, and I was picking up some shirts, and I set my my GPS back to this address, 434 Main Street, just put it on. I always do the GPS. I go to this place, once every few months, and I still can't figure it out. But I set it, and then I get in my car, I drive, and I start driving, and obviously my head is like in all these other spaces all the things that I need to do. I gotta get back. I have a client to coach, then I have to do the youth program, then I have to do these sales, I have to do this marketing, stuff like that. And I'm driving, and I see I had someone here that I needed to have a conversation with at 12. And I was going to get there at 11:45. So the GPS is telling me 11:45. All I cared about was the 11:45. And I looked at it. I had no idea I was driving in the wrong direction. I was going to arrive at 11:45 in San Francisco. And then I came out of that deep thought, and I'm like, I was on 101 going in the opposite direction. I'm like, I'm not hitting Gilroy. I'm like, wait, I'm seeing more buildings. This is not looking like Gilroy. You start coming towards Gilroy, and you start seeing less buildings. And then I look at my GPS, and I click on the address, and it says 434 Main Street, San Francisco. And I'm like, oh my God, this is not good.
But I think, in talking about that balance, I think there's times where, like, that's an example where the glass tipped a little bit too far. We got too close, glass tipped over. Lesson learned, right? Rather than being like, oh man, like, okay, tip the glass over, or with your shoulder in the bicycle kick. It's going to happen. We're not going to balance things all the time. And sometimes, those negative things, those are chances to learn, rather than just be like, oh, this is a bad thing. Like, I'm bad, right? It's like, no, this is a learning lesson here, right? And maybe this comes from, we talked about some of the sports and like the attitude of like, hey, you lost, so let's get better, right? Cool, you tipped the glass over. Well, how can we avoid that next time? And sometimes you don't know where those boundaries are. We don't know how far we can go in one direction until we hit that point where it's like, hey, I got injured, right? I went in the wrong directions. Sometimes we tip the glass over, it's a bigger mess than others. Right. But we got to kind of figure out where those boundaries are, and we don't know them until we get to that point, right? Yeah, you're injured. Now like, hey, if I'm going to do a bicycle kick again, I got to either train a bit better for this. I can't just go out there and just go for it, right? I know that's the limit of where I was. At some point in time, you probably could just go out there and done it. Now we've understood that boundary's changed.
Yeah, 100%. And, and I always say this to people, because usually when they make a mistake or quote unquote a failure, they become very negative with themselves. But I tell them, like, all we're doing in life is we're just collecting data. That's it. Every time we make a mistake, we're collecting data, right? And I see this with Luca, and how parenting happens. It's like, at some point you're gonna have to let him jump off the counter, because if you catch him every time,
it's not gonna know.
he's never going to know his boundaries, right? And we had this conversation with another parent yesterday because his child is. We went to Wolf Lodge, which is a water slide park this weekend, and Luca's he's very athletic. We allow him to jump around. He still struggles in the social aspect where strangers he's still not very comfortable with. But our other friend, his kid was just off the walls, right? And we were having this conversation yesterday where I was saying, but like, it's interesting because now kids are not off the walls as we would call it, and now we make that as a wrong behavior, like, oh, something's wrong with that child. Well, no, it's got to be play. That's play. That's what a kid is supposed to be. Let them run around, and as scary as a parent it can be to know that your kid is like that, right? Because they're gonna get hurt at some point. And maybe I have a different point of view, but I feel like they're gonna have to bump their heads a couple times, and you have to allow it, right? Like and we talked about, I have this big scar on my forehead. Like, I did a cartwheel into a brick wall. Well, guess what? I learned not to do any cartwheels in front of a brick wall. Like,
now you learn the distance you need to do a successful cartwheel. Right?
Person who touches a hot plate, like those are your indicators. Now you have that data. That kid will never touch that hot plate again, right? And if we coddle our kids at a young age and we protect them and we create all these barriers because we want to make sure they have the perfect life or they don't get hurt, they don't. Eventually, later in life, they're going to struggle.
And I think that translates to adults, right? I think there's adults out there who coddle themselves and they're scared to make a mistake. They're scared to find those boundaries. They're scared to figure out where the edge of this thing is because they don't want to fail,
Comfort.
right? And that's a hard thing for people to do. And the more you do it, the more you get better at it, right? Again, whatever you do to your body's going to get better at it. If you're used to pushing the boundaries and failing, it's going to get a bit more comfortable. The first time you do it, it's going to be this big mental hurdle. And then you do it and you're like, oh, that actually wasn't that hard. But yeah, and as a parent, you kind of are in charge of your child, the smaller human being, that you have to allow them for that, right? And then you got to make sure that for yourself, hey, what behaviors am I, what is my, I'm not letting, Luca jump off the counter. What am I doing there that I'm not letting myself found that boundary to know exactly how far I can push myself or what I'm capable of.
Right. Yeah, the whole tipping the glass, that's perfect. I'm gonna steal that from you.
Take it.
Do you use that with your clients? Have you used that before?
I talk about balance being a variable thing, right? But yeah, it's like I said, it's one way or the other. How far can we go? How far can we come back?
Have you used that before with them? Have you explained it in that form? That was very easy to understand.
I think that was
you just made it on the spot.
Yeah,
I like it.
Trying to come up with a better way.
That's one thing about coaching is you're always learning simpler ways to explain things. I think that's one of the cool things that I've learned and that I love about coaching is that you have the client that I always use the lawnmower effect, right? Or the if you do a lateral raise, I always say, pour a cup of coffee. And then people don't understand. They're like, I don't drink coffee. I'm like, oh my God. You gotta pour a cup of milk. Oh, okay. And so you're always trying ways to simplify things, and you come up with these analogies and these metaphors, and it's so cool how over time, right, you're able to just create stuff like that on the fly.
I had one the other day. Trying to talk to my client. She's like, oh, I was in the sauna the other day and I was doing dips. And I'm like, why are you doing dips in the sauna? Like, you're supposed to be relaxing. Like, if you're in the gym workout, if you're in the sauna, relax. And she wasn't getting the concept of, like, more isn't better. Like, better is better. So I was like, okay, hey, you like to cook, right? She's like, yeah. What's your favorite thing to cook? I'm like, you're on your deathbed. One dish. She starts talking about this dish. And it's this fish dish that I guess her uncle used to make for her. She loved it. Has hollandaise sauce. I'm like, cool. How do you make hollandaise sauce? And she goes through tiling it, and she's like, oh, you put a little bit of mustard in there? I'm like, oh, I like mustard. She's like, yeah. It's like, what if you put a lot of mustard in? Like, I really like mustard. She's like, no, it's going to mess it up. And I just kind of like sat there, and then she's like, I see. It's like, right? So maybe just because we like doing something, there's a time to put a lot, and there's a time to put a little bit in there. And that, relating it to cooking, relating it to a dish that she has this like emotional childhood memory to, you could see the wheels click, and she's like, I see that. Now I get this. Now I'm getting this thing of I don't need to do more. And putting it in terms, relating it to people, figuring out what your people like to do, what their hobbies are, what their interests are, and making an analogy to the thing they understand. Because again, as a coach, they're coming to you for fitness because they don't understand fitness. Mm-hmm. That's why they're here. If they understood this, they wouldn't need you. They'd be one of your friends in the gym that you guys can talk shop about sets and reps and different bicep variation curls. They're not that person. They're here asking for help. So you got to relate this to a subject that they understand, and they don't get fitness. Even if you've been training them for years, they still probably don't get fitness. That's why they're still working with you. Find a way they can connect. Find the subject that they do know about and make the analogy there.
Mm. How long have you been training for?
4 years.
4 years. Okay. So what was it like day one, right? Your first year of coaching in comparison to where you're at now. And obviously you've gotten a new position as well, which is a fitness manager, and you've been there for a couple years?
Yeah, I've been doing it for a year, maybe more.
I'd like to hear both sides, right? Both areas. What's the difference now from when you first started being a PT coach, and what's been the difference when you first started fitness manager?
As a trainer, I was definitely more uptight. Like, I was just like really focused on like, if people didn't do something the right way, like the first time, I was just like, come on, why aren't you getting this? Again, it's learning that they don't know. And now it's like, if we make an improvement, right? If like we're squatting and it used to be if they didn't pick it up like really quickly and move on at a rate that I would, then I was like, man, what's going on? Like, am I a bad coach? Like, are they just not getting this? Like, what's going on? And a lot of that, what I kind of put on myself, like, man, I'm not a good coach because they're not picking this up quick enough. And now it's like, no, this progress is going to take time. And there's some days where it's like, hey, some days we're going to make progress. Some days we're just going to sit and talk, right? Because they're people at the end of the day, mm-hmm. and they have things going on, and they're not in their head. And it's like, now the challenge is, can I get them to make progress almost without them noticing, just by like the programming, the things that we do, and they can come in and enjoy it, because that's what's going to keep them coming back. So it's more that like that kind of like 10,000 foot view of like, mm-hmm. hey, I'm just trying to see, like, are we just going in the right direction? And as long as we're going in the right direction and we're keep moving, we're probably going to get somewhere. Versus like, initially when I was training, I just wanted everyone to get there as fast as possible because I wanted people to get results, because I thought that that's what being a good coach was just get quick results. Managing's been a whirlwind. It's been something that I'm still don't think I'm very good at. Mm-hmm. Learning people, trying to think of like, trainers are a very interesting breed of people. And you get a lot of different people who want to be trainers. And so initially, again, I think I fell into that rut of like wanting things to happen quickly, like similar I did with my clients. And now I'm realizing like, no, just like how I manage my clients, I have to manage being a manager. It's the same concept, is we just got to give people a good direction, right? And making sure people feel supported is the biggest one. My clients, the people at the gym that I work at, the employees at Power, making sure they feel supported, making sure it's an environment where they can feel that they can come to me and talk to me about things. I remember I was in Aruba with my buddy Keenan, and he was telling me about his manager, and he was just going on and on about how much he loved his manager because of how much she wanted him to succeed in these kind of things. And I was like, man, my goal would be to have one of my employees talk about me that way. Mm-hmm. And so now I got to reverse engineer. I'm like, well, what are the behaviors that she's doing, right? She wasn't hard on him. Again, it's support. Give them support, and then they'll be just as hard on themselves. People are very good at being hard on themselves. But having that support, having that space, we're like, hey, okay, cool. How can we improve this? How can we do better, right? Not just trying to push people that way, of being a resource for them to come and like, hey, what do we need to move forward? So I think that's something I've learned in management.
Yeah. So it's finding their interest and putting focus in their interests first, because right, as a coach, we all want to show results because we know that results sell. So obviously as a new coach, we want to build our books. So, and you see this a lot, right? We're trying to get those transformations. So we're trying to push results on people. We want to do it as fast as possible so they get the results, so that we can post it on social media, so then that we can get more business and we become more successful. Same thing happens when you're a fitness manager, because now you have the pressure of, now it's not about just me, it's also about the gym. I have the pressure of this other boss that is telling me that I need to hit certain numbers, and I know that if I hit those numbers, then maybe there is a commission, or maybe there's another possibility for me to grow and go into another space. And so I think it's that a lot of the times we look at it from our own interests at the beginning, and that's, I think, the early stages of learning how to manage people. And I think over time you start understanding that if I put focus on them first and I worry about what's important to them, and you nailed it in the head earlier, you were talking about with clients, sometimes we don't have to train.
Sometimes it's just talk about our favorite show.
Sometimes we have to sit down and take a moment and talk to them, because and when you start seeing people for a while, you understand what something's up, right? You know how someone walks in, and I always know this. I have one specific client that she'll come in, how you doing? It was great. And she will tell me like a list of all the things that she succeeded at and how happy she is and how excited. Like, you can tell she can't wait to walk into the gym to tell me all the things that she was successful at this week. And then there's days where she'll come in and I was like, how's it going? It was all right. I'm like, all right, let's have a seat. What's going on?
I tell people I use my psych degree way more than I use my kinesiology degree in this job. But that's the job. The job is people. And if people feel like you're there for them, and as being a coach, like, you are there for them. You want them to succeed. And yes, fitness is the goal. But, the biggest wins are when clients, I had a client apply for a job that she wasn't qualified for. And just the confidence of her to even apply for it. And guess what? She got it. And now she's killing it. And maybe her fitness goes up and down, but the fact that she's doing that job and then the quality of life that improved, those wins, those mental changes outside the gym are way more beneficial and way more longer lasting than any physical transformation in the gym.
Well, and I think that's a big part too, that when people come into and they're so hyper-focused on their transformation and the aesthetics, right? And they become really frustrated because they can't get the result. Like, I've learned this along the way, that I'm gonna start peeling this onion and start going into the deeper. I'm gonna go into the core and identify, like, what is going on in your life. And the only way you find that out is through conversation. You have to have deeper conversations than, hey, how's it going? Oh, it went great. Sweet. All right, let's get started. 10 push-ups, right? You have to, those sessions are therapy sessions. You want to know how many siblings they have. You want to know what the relationship with their parents are. You want to know what the relationship with their husband is. You want to gather as much information, because then you can start understanding the behavior. Exactly. And I don't come from my psychology degree, right? I've just coached thousands of people, and I'm very curious. I'm not afraid to ask questions. Sometimes I ask the wrong question by mistake.
Happens.
But by just being curious, you find out a lot about people. You find out, you start understanding behaviors. You're like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And one of the reasons why we're sitting here too, right, is I just want to learn. I want to learn. I want to learn about you. I want to learn about your experiences. You brought some value to my customers that they can take today. I hope I brought some to yours, right? But we're sitting here, we're having a conversation, and we're learning about each other. I get to pick at your brain, right? And you get to pick at mine. And I think that is the beauty of conversation. And I always tell everybody, becoming a personal trainer, becoming a coach, just having the ability to talk to so many people and hear so many stories, like, I'm the winner here. Like, I am winning so much because I get to pick from the mistakes that she's made or he's made and be like, okay, this person's amazing. And like you were saying about the manager, right? This person's amazing, but I also did see this other area that I definitely don't want to be, right? And I want to be around successful people. And there's obviously success is very different to everybody. But let's say we're going to hang out with all millionaires because I want to become a millionaire eventually. Like, I'm going to pick at all of them. I'm going to look at how they treat their family. I'm going to look at how they run their business. I'm going to look at, how they take care of their health. And, I'm only going to take what I like from each one of them. But the flaws that I see, it's not for me to judge, right? It's for me to understand. I'm going to go ahead and look at that and be like, I can see where this behavior can lead to that. Now I know to look out for that. If I start catching myself maybe not paying attention to my son, right, then that's a sign for me to maybe start putting work aside and making some time for that. Or if I start seeing myself starting to get a belly, maybe I'm working too many hours, or I'm having too many coffees, or I'm having too many drinks at these social networking events, and maybe I need to stop that or correct that. And I believe that being a coach is a blessing for me, and it's helped me so much in my life. And I've always said it, like, my clients have helped me get out of the huge hole that I was at one point in my life, and I'm very thankful for that. And I hope to do the same. I hope to start the conversations and be more intentional with my conversations so that we can pass that on to them as well.
I think conversations like this are what helps that, right? Now we get a chance for other people to see, you never know who's going to glean something from this conversation that's going to help them fix that mental block or push themselves over the edge or reflect on something of like, oh yeah, maybe that is something I need to work on. Maybe that is something that I haven't been paying attention to as much. And getting out and having these conversations and just listening to people's talk, people share ideas and reflecting on it. That's the benefit of these.
Yeah. And we've had so many conversations. I feel like every time you and I sit down and we talk, it's been great. I think another part that I like to highlight about a lot of my friends that are athletes, and I don't know if this is just us or if it's somewhere else, but a lot of the friends that are athletes that I don't see for a while, right? Whenever we come back and we meet, we just pick up like we were never there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we never left. And sometimes I see a lot of people become really attached to people, and because they didn't call them this last week, or all of a sudden they're upset and it throws off their entire day. But every time I meet with you, it's like we have these amazing conversations, and they're always positive, right? It's always a positive conversation, and it's always like, how are you doing? How's work going, right? What can I help, right? What are some of the areas that I can help you with? And it goes the same way with you. I think one of the best things that I've picked up from you has been learning just how to be more calm and more relaxed, right? I've always been super uptight and just always on the go. And one of the things that I've learned from you over the past years that I've met you and known you is, even though, like we spoke about balance, there isn't that balance, you're okay with having some days where you contribute to your friends and you make that time. And, you just went on that trip the other day, and you took our car out there, and I was telling you, oh, did you take any pictures? And you were like,
I'm terrible at
I
that.
I didn't take my phone with me. It was no phones. And I think that's such an amazing thing that you have the ability to do. And, when I look at how you contribute to your friends and how you make time for them, even though in the busy world that you're in, I highly respect that. And I had that similar conversation that I had with Michelle, because I just, Michelle, I just had her in here too. And I had the same conversation with her about the way both of you contribute to your friends. I think that's amazing.
I've heard it on another podcast of a very long time ago, and it's the concept that stuck with me very well, and it's this term of an emotional bank account. And when it comes to your relationships and your friends, like just like a normal bank account, if you're always making withdrawals, eventually funds run low, right? And so thinking about the people that are important in your life, you need to make emotional deposits into those people, right? And we're all busy. We all have things going on. But if someone cares about you, just like you, if we have, we're working. Well, I have this new hobby I want. Cool. Well, I'm going to set some money aside so I can get some new golf clubs, right? Or a guitar, or whatever it is for this hobby that you want to get, right? We put monetary withdrawals in there. Same thing happens with people, right? Every once in a while, we just got to put a little emotional deposit. Sorry, blanking on it. Yeah, emotional deposits of, hey, I was thinking of you. Hey, let's go do this thing, right? And that's how you keep some of these friendships and relationships going. And then once you have, I'm sure some of your boys from college, and same with some of my buddies, I don't see them very often, but we've made so many emotional deposits over the years, and that when they need something, boom, it's there. And then when we pick back up, that emotional, that balance is still there, where we can just pick up and like, hey, how's it going? Update each other on the life, and then we're just back into our normal conversations.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, we'll end it on that, because that is a great way to close a podcast right there. Once again, it was a pleasure to have you.
Happy to be here.
I think we're going to have more conversations. This was fun.
So. I agree.
This was a lot of fun. How'd you feel?
I enjoyed just chatting back and forth. It was, like I said, we've had these conversations many, many times, and so it wasn't even like it was, the microphones and all that wasn't even that different. It was just getting back into those conversations.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you, man. It was a pleasure.